Welcome to Course 2. My name is Yvonne Ramsey. I am the Senior Operations Manager here at Explore. My role is to make sure that all of our services and activities in the countries that we take our customers to have been safety checked and that these checks are up to date. We do this through risk assessments and also by asking our suppliers to fill in standard operating procedures. I will be going through both of these in the next two courses. So what is a risk? A risk can be seen in two ways. It can be seen as an opportunity, which is a risk with a positive effect. However, it can also be seen as a threat, and this is where a risk may have negative consequences. However, what we do know is where there is a risk, there is a chance, be it high or low, that somebody could be harmed. What is a risk assessment? A risk assessment is simply a careful examination of what could cause harm, to weigh up its impact and see how this impact could be reduced. As an international tour operator in the UK, under the 1992 Package Tour Regulations, Explore are responsible for all services and activities in the package that we sell to our customers. These include hotels, flights, transports, boats, activities. We are also responsible to make sure that the countries we are taking our customers to are a safe environment as reasonably possible. So when do we put this risk assessment together? Immediately, before we take any of our customers there. So how do we put a risk assessment together? This can be done at several levels. Firstly, we would look at country-specific risks, everything about the country. This could include political, climatic, medical, geohazards such as hurricanes, as well as security. Here as a UK operator, we use the UK Foreign Office advice to assist us in finding these risks before we go to the country. Then we would look at the tour-specific risks. This would be the actual destinations we will be visiting, as well as the services on that tour. Then we would look at service-specific risks. These would be hotels, vehicles, vessels, and staff. And finally, we would look at activity-specific risks. So these would be where there is a high-risk activity on the itinerary. So where do we start putting a risk assessment together? Before we travel to any countries or take customers to any countries, Explore identify the risks that are in those countries. We sometimes start our research before even traveling to the countries ourselves. We have many sources of information that will help us put a risk assessment together. As mentioned previously, the UK Foreign Office advice is a governing body which gives us all the risk details for all the countries that we go to. We also look at the US State Department and the Australian travel advice, as we have many American and Australian customers who also travel with Explore. For medical risks, we may look in more details at organisations such as the WHO, the World Health Organization. They give us details on their website of the risks, medical risks in the countries that we go to, as well as prevention before travel. On some of our trips, we may be looking at internal travel to get around the area, and as well as individual airlines that will get us to these countries. We will check airline safety before traveling there. This also includes looking at the European Union banned list, as well as IOSA and ISA, which are two airline governing bodies. We will also look at social media and local media for any current affairs and new risks in the area. But most importantly of all, we have the local agent's knowledge. Every country that Explore travels to has a local representative, what we call the tour operator, like yourselves, and we will use their local knowledge helping us put this risk assessment together. Once we've listed all of these risks, we will record them and prepare. To fail to prepare is to prepare to fail. Once we have identified the risks, we put measures in place to prevent or minimize the likelihood of this risk resulting in an incident or an injury. At Explore, we call these control measures. These control measures could be such things as a guide giving a special brief or giving special warnings to avoid somewhere or something, therefore reducing the impact of the risk. It could also mean a driver or a guide or hotel staff checking that equipment is there and that it is in good working order. It could mean us avoiding visiting a certain area or at certain times of the day when it is busy, therefore deeming it more dangerous. It may mean us using only one transport company because this has been risk assessed and therefore we see it as safe to use. It could also mean avoid visiting at certain times of the year, such as monsoon and hurricane seasons. It may mean us only using one particular service that has completed a standard operating procedure, which I will run through in course 3. It could also mean us using a particular provider, what we call a third-party provider, what you call an extended supplier chain, because they have been risk assessed and we therefore see them as safe to use. All of these are what we refer to as control measures, and these are put in place to reduce the impact of the risk. Make sure you have all of the risks recorded and that the control measures are also recorded alongside. So what if something goes wrong? Even with all the control measures that we have put in place, things still go wrong. With every risk comes consequences. Part of risk management is to have a plan in place should things go wrong. Here at Explore, we call this reactive measures. Are you prepared? Do you have your reactive measures in place? These would include having an emergency preparedness plan, a list of numbers of who will need to be contacted should something go wrong. This could be the agent, the police, the ambulance, the fire brigade, but it could also mean the transport company, the hotel management, insurance, and possibly embassies. Make sure that your crew is well prepared and well trained. Your tour guides should be first aid trained and therefore ready to react in the case of an injury. They should also be able to contact medical help and get that immediately. Part of this plan could also mean rearranging or cancelling part of the itinerary, having what we refer to as a backup plan. So as well as having the risk detail, having the control measures in place, also make sure that you record these reactive measures as part of your risk assessment. So then comes the question, can we take these risks? During the process of putting a risk assessment together, you will have to make the decision of whether it is worth taking this risk. But how do you do this? It can be quite difficult on defining whether a risk is high, medium, or low. Often we say it's common sense, but it is worth looking at certain factors. Volume of customers affected. Would it just be one, or would it be the entire group of 18 or more? Check the accident history. Do they have an accident record book? How many accidents has happened? Just one or more? And what is the outcome when something goes wrong? Would it be a small medical issue, which could be covered by first aid? Or would it end up in a customer having what would be called life-changing injuries? You need to look at these 3 issues and then deem whether it is worth taking the risk or not. We have an example here of where we have taken the risk. Balloon rides. All the customers could be affected. Accidents are quite common, and the outcome is life-changing injuries. Therefore, Explore decided to stop doing this. The risk was seen, even with all the control measures in place, as being too high. We therefore decided to avoid it. On the other hand, horse riding. One member of the crew could be hurt, even though accidents are common and the outcome could be life-changing injuries. We realised we could manage this risk. We put in safety equipment such as helmets, make sure we only used healthy trained horses, and that these are led by competent trained staff. We therefore decided to accept this risk. Once you have a complete risk assessment, you must continually monitor all the sources of information that were used to put together the risk assessment, as the impact of any of these risks that you have logged may change. So, recording your findings. Here's an example of the columns that we use when we're putting our risk assessments together. The type of risk. So this could be political, could be commercial, it could be a particular activity. Then we list what the actual risk is. It could be a theft, it could be hurricane, it could be snorkeling, could be trekking, diving, or so on. In the risk detail, you can put more specific details, such as the thefts only occur in the metro at rush hour, or this hurricanes only come in September to October. And then you add the control measures. So how you're managing this risk. So for example, with hurricanes, do not run trips in September to October. And then finally add in the last column your reactive measures. What will you do if something goes wrong? So if a hurricane comes early, say in July or August, what will happen to your group? Do you have an evacuation? Always look at these 5 steps when putting a risk assessment together. So for example, the type of risk could be security. The actual risk could be a theft. The risk detail could be thefts are common on the underground in rush hour. A control measure, use the metro in non-peak times and avoid the central stations. And finally, a reactive measure. If someone is robbed, therefore take them to the police station and get the necessary paperwork. So when is your risk assessment complete? Once you have assessed all the risks, put down the control and reactive measures, log them all on your document, only then should you start putting a trip together. With this in place, you can rest assured that you have taken all the necessary precautions for the safekeeping of your customers. Does this mean the job is done? No. Every time you amend or create a new itinerary in that country, or even change just one service, you need to start the risk assessment again. Go through the stages we have gone through in this course, identify the new risk, log the new risk, add the control measure and the reactive measure, and decide whether it is a risk you are willing to take. You have to keep this up to date. New risks will always arise. And finally, make sure that everyone involved in the responsibility chain has a copy of the most up-to-date risk assessment. So in summary, having a completed, comprehensive risk assessment in place will help you sleep at night. It will help reduce your public liability, which Margaret will be going through in Course 5. It will also decrease the number of incidents you have, it will protect your company's reputation, and it will help your team feel prepared should anything go wrong. So what do we do next? As part of putting a risk assessment together, we often have to do extra safety checks, more detailed checks. These are known as standard operating procedures, which I will be running through in Course 3. Also, you will have to create an emergency preparedness plan, which we will be going through in course 4. Thank you.